first off, thank you everybody for being here today. Really appreciate the support for this and the interest that people have taken. To start off, we're going to be doing half portions on all our cocktails today. That's because we're doing 4 cocktails within the span of an hour. I don't want, that's a lot even for me to be drinking. So we want to make sure that everybody has a good time and, fun, but not too much fun, right? In addition to that, we're going to be going through the history of cocktails here. This is going to be kind of starting in the early 1800s, and we're going to go all the way up to Prohibition. It's a kind of a common misconception that most cocktails were invented during Prohibition to kind of cover up the cheap quality of booze that were being made at the time. It's actually not really true. The origins of cocktails kind of go back to the early 1800s, and that's where our first drink is going to start, and that drink is going to be the Tom Collins. The Tom Collins was invented in Limmer's Old House in London, and it's not a proper cocktail. It's actually what is known as a punch. Now, punches go back to the 1600s even, and they would have been kind of a communal kind of thing that you would order at a tavern or a hotel. They would take out a big bowl of punch, sit it on your table, and you'd all sit around with your friends, ladle it out of the punch bowl with a spoon, and kind of sit around for a couple hours just having a good time drinking these kind of less strong drinks than our modern cocktails. So, to start off, the way this is going to work is I've got all of our ingredients pre-measured out here. The first drink, the Tom Collins, is going to be right here. If everybody wants to come up, I have a couple plates here. You can take back one for each of you, right? So for every group, that's going to be 2 of each of these. This is the simple syrup, lemon juice, and that is the gin. All right. All right. All right, so to start out, some of us have 2 metal tins, some of us have a glass tin and a metal tin. For instructional purposes, your smaller tin is going to be my glass tin, right? If you have a glass tin, then just kind of follow along as I do. All right, I like to start off by making the cocktails in the larger tin. It's when you pour them in, it prevents any splashing, gives just more volume for that cocktail to be contained in. And when we build cocktails, I like to start out with the ingredient that we're using the least of first. Now, this makes it so that if you mess up, you're not dumping all of that liquor, right? You're just dumping, your sugar syrup or your lemon juice. The cheaper ingredients, keeps it a little bit more under wraps there. So, first off, we're going to be putting our simple syrup into our large shaker tin here. This simple syrup is a 50-50 mix of sugar and water. You can make it really easily at home, or you can find it at the grocery store. It's not very expensive either way. Then we've got our lemon juice here. Add that to the tin. And then finally, we've got our gin. All right. Now, with your the small side of your shaker tin, or I have some smaller tins where the glasses are, just scoop out some, one ice cube is all you want. One ice cube for this. Yep. And I'll explain the reason for that in a second. So just one ice cube. We're going to be doing what's known as a whip shake here. Now the technique behind a whip shake is just to use one ice cube and shake your drink until it's dissolved. The reason we're doing that with this Tom Collins is because we're going to be topping it up with soda water in a minute here. We don't want to over dilute the drink when we do that, so we only need one ice cube to start out. So just, you don't need to slam it too hard, just you want like a good connection there, right? And when you start out shaking, take it, you want to hold it horizontally like this. Just shake it back and forth slowly at first. What that's going to do is it's going to chill down the air inside there, create a nice seal. It's going to reduce the pressure inside of this your shaker tins and then cause them to stick together. Then you want to go back and forth, really throw that liquid back and forth, make sure it hits both ends of your shaker tins. And what we're doing here is we're activating that lemon juice. We're aerating the lemon juice, making sure it's really integrated into the cocktail. And just shake until you can't hear that ice cube rattling around in there anymore. All right, and then once you're done with that, the way I like to separate these tins, this can be a little tricky sometimes. I like to take where this lip overhangs right here and just kind of hit it with the base of my hand. That'll break that pressure seal that you've got going on there and make it nice and easy to get apart. All right, and today we're going to be building our Tom Collins because they are half size in these rocks glasses. Normally you would use a namesake Collins glass, but because of the smaller volume, I want to make sure that wash line gets to the top of the glass and we're not going to run the risk of over diluting our cocktails. So just take it like so, and because I already pre-strained the lemon juice and there's no ice in here, we don't need to strain again. We're just going to dump that right into our glass. And then pack this glass up with as much ice as you can. Don't be afraid of adding too much ice. The more ice you add, the less dilution you're actually going to get, because it keeps that drink colder and it prevents... Is that one stuck there a little bit? Let me see if I can help you out. Ooh, wow. There we go. Perfect. No problem. All right. And then I've got some cups of soda water on your tables there. And we're just going to fill the rest of that glass up, now that we've got it all packed in nice with ice, with some soda water. Take your bar spoon. Give it just a quick stir. That'll integrate that soda water with the cocktail. And then finally, I've got some garnish cups out on those tables for you. Grab your lemon wheel that's pre-cut there. And stick it right on the side of your cup, just like so. And there we have our Tom Collins. Now feel free to enjoy that while I tell you a little bit more of the history of the Tom Collins and the spirit of gin that we used in this cocktail. So the Tom Collins, like I said, dates back to around 1810, Limmer's Old House in London, where a bartender by the name of John Collins, which the cocktail is also known by, came up with this drink. He was very, as far as we can tell, he was a very popular bartender. He had a couple of poems written about him that were published in local newspapers. And over the following decades, this drink made the transition from England to America, and it kept its name of John Collins, but it also evolved into a Tom Collins as well. And this has to do with the style of gin that was used in the cocktail at the time. Today, we're most familiar with our London Dry style of gin, but this is a fairly recent innovation in terms of gin's history. At the time, back in the early 1800s in America, we had what was known as Hollands gin. Now, this is kind of a traditional style of gin that would have been made with a whiskey malt base. So an unaged whiskey malt base, it has a very malt-like flavor. If you've had Irish whiskey, it's kind of like that. But it also has the flavor of the namesake juniper berries that are in gin. And when it came over to America, they started also making it with what was called Old Tom gin. And what Old Tom gin was it actually comes originally from England, they would sweeten their gin a little bit to cover up some impurities, and that was known as Old Tom style of gin. And that's where we get our London Dry style from much later. It's called dry because there's no sugar added to it, unlike the Old Tom gin. There's a couple theories that when people were talking about their martinis back in the day, you've heard of a dry martini. They weren't talking about how much vermouth to add. They were actually talking about what type of gin they wanted with London Dry gin. Gin as a spirit is actually one of the oldest spirits still in production today. It originates from the 1500s in the Netherlands. They were just figuring out distillation at this time. They had some really kind of rough distillation methods. It wasn't very exact. The art had not been quite perfected yet. And they found that their malt base that they were distilling, which is basically what you're using to make beer, came out very rough. It was borderline undrinkable. So they started flavoring it with an infusion of juniper berries. And juniper berries aren't actually true berries. They grow on pine trees, and they're really condensed pine cones that have a lot of sap and pine tree flavor in them. And this has been used since then to flavor gin. And even in your London Dry styles today, even the ones that have a lot of citrus flavor or other spices, you're always going to find that juniper note in gin. That's where it comes from. So, do we have any questions right now? All right. Well, if we are ready to move on to our next cocktail, we can come up and grab the next batch of shots here. Now, if you'd like, we are going to be using the rocks glass again for this one. You can dump that out in this bucket up here. Or if you're still working on that first cocktail, I can grab you another rocks glass as well. Oh, yeah, we've got some on the other tables as well. So that works too. Yes, sir. Yes, at the end of the class, I have some cocktail recipes for you all to take home, recreate these drinks here, and also a little survey just about your experience with the class. So, yeah, gotcha. There we go. No problem. Oh, yeah.
The benefit of being the cameraman.
All right. So while you're still enjoying those Tom Collins, let me give a little history on our next cocktail here. I know it's one you've all heard of and probably had before. It's the Old Fashioned, right? Formerly known as the cocktail, right? The one we're making today is going to be the whiskey cocktail. This dates back to about 1806, early 1800s, and it didn't really come into full force until a little bit later, maybe about the 1820s, 1830s. You'll have to forgive me with some of the vagueness around these specific dates. Leave it to cocktails to have kind of a muddy history, right? When you're drinking, you're not always recording everything that's going on. And sometimes that's for the best. So, traditionally, you're going to make your old fashions in the glass. We're not going to have to use any shaker tins or anything like that, just right in the glass. And what you're going to start out with is your sugar syrup, just like always. Now, it's pretty common to see people make old fashions with sugar cubes that they dissolve into the drink as they make it. That's what I tend to do when I'm working up here at the Empire Lounge. But there's not really a huge difference that you're going to get in the final drink. It's just that last sip is going to have some undissolved sugar in that. Some people really like it, and some people aren't a big fan of it. It's all up to preference. That's what you'll find with all of these cocktails. There's a couple different ways to do all of them. There's not necessarily a right way, but there's the way you like, and that's, at the end of the day, that's what really matters. So then we're going to also add our bitters here. And then finally, our whiskey. The whiskey we're using here is Rittenhouse Rye. It is a bottled in bond whiskey. That means it is at least 100 proof and has been aged for 4 years under U.S. government supervision. So next what we're going to do is just kind of give that a quick stir. And we're going to have to, we might not have to share the bar spoons actually. So if any of you guys want to grab a bar spoon off one of the tables so you can stir simultaneously. But we're just going to stir this. And the reason we're stirring it before we add ice here is so we can really integrate those ingredients. Whiskey and sugar syrup do not like to mix. They have very different densities. And when they're cold, they like to mix even less. So while they're both at room temperature, you want to make sure you integrate those before you add any ice. All right. And then we are going to finally add our ice here. And really, again, don't be afraid to pack that in with that ice. You want that dilution in this cocktail. It's a pretty strong drink. And now let's take this opportunity to talk a little bit about stirring technique. Now, especially when there's ice in your glass, the way you want to stir a cocktail is you want to hold your spoon almost like a pencil. It's got these twists in it for a reason. That makes it easier for you to let it rotate in your hand. So you're going to take the back of the spoon, press it up against the glass here, and kind of edge it down in there so it's still touching the back of the glass. And then as you stir it, let the spoon spin in your hand and keep it pressed against the back. Keep the back of that spoon pressed against the back of the glass. This is to minimize the aeration that you're getting into your cocktail, and also to minimize the noise that you're making when you stir it. So actually in Japan, they're very serious about their cocktail culture over there. Bartenders will go and train for months to be able to stir their cocktails as fast as they can without making any noise whatsoever. So it's a big deal. It took me a while to really master that, so don't be upset if you can't get it on your first try here. It is definitely something to get used to. All right. So once we've got that stirred and integrated and it's started to kind of melt the ice, dilute a little bit, we are going to take our orange peel. And with the orange side out, so not the white side, but the orange side, what you want to do is I like to kind of grab it on both ends of the long side here, hold it right above my cocktail, and then just kind of press down gently. You don't want to rip it in half. Just be gentle. And what that's doing is there's actually essential oils in this orange peel here, and they are squirting out, and they are coming right on top of the cocktail. It's going to introduce aromatics. And the importance of that is aromatics really affect the way you experience tastes. You might have heard that your nose has a lot to do with your sense of taste, right? You know, you ever do the thing in elementary school where you plug your nose and then you see, you know, can you taste the difference between this or that, right? Well, it's the exact same thing with cocktails, right? We want to make sure that we have those aromatics on top because as we smell them, it's going to affect how we taste the different flavor notes in the whiskey. And then finally, you can just kind of drop that right in there. It's going to also kind of infuse into the drink as you sip it. And that right there is our Old Fashioned. Simple as that. Now, the Old Fashioned is viewed as the first cocktail or rather the whiskey cocktail is. Because the old-fashioned, it doesn't really become the old-fashioned until new, different styles of other cocktails are introduced, right? And the first mention we have of the whiskey cocktail actually comes from a newspaper clipping in 1803. So that goes way back. And it was kind of introduced in this satirical article describing the daily life of what was known at the time as a sporting man. Now, a sporting man wasn't someone who played baseball or a horse jockey or anything like that. He was the type of guy who was probably starting his day off with a drink, going to what were known as sportsmen's clubs, which were places for people to get together, play pool, darts, gamble, drink, right? And if this sounds like a place you might know, there's a reason for that. There's a reason for that, because the Elks was actually started by a group of what would have been called sporting men at the time in the mid to late 1800s, right? And to this day, we still have some sporting men amongst us. So, but yeah, so these men were not, especially at the time, by some of the aristocrats, not looked upon very favorably. They were subject to a lot of scrutiny, and not all of it necessarily undue. And while that article I mentioned earlier was the first mention of a cocktail that we have in print, the first description that we have of it comes in 1806 from one Harry Croswell. And Harry Croswell was a political journalist, right? He was he was very into critiquing the culture, giving his opinion on the political ongoings and things like that. And he started out by publishing in his newspaper a list of drinks that a Democrat would have ordered at a bar. It was meant to be satirical. He was kind of poking fun. Not the Democrats of today. These were the Democratic Republicans, so the party of Thomas Jefferson. So not much in common with our modern day political associations. But one of the readers of his magazine saw it and said, "I've never heard of a cocktail." That's how new the cocktail was at this point in time. And he asked, "What is it?" So I have a quote from his response, and this is the first historical definition of the cocktail as we know it today. "Cocktail, then, is a stimulating liquor composed of spirits of any kind, sugar, water, and bitters. It is vulgarly called bittered sling, and is supposed to be an excellent electioneering potion, inasmuch as it renders the heart stout and bold at the same time that it fuddles the head. It is said also to be of great use to a Democratic candidate, because a person having swallowed a glass of it is ready to swallow anything else." So it didn't have the reputation that it has today. It was definitely seen as being ordered by, these young men, these young sporting types, kind of ne'er-do-wells and rapscallions, right? But over the years, as these young men grew up and became old men with their own established place in society, it started, as many things do, it became the standard as opposed to this, kind of new, bold, and creative thing. And along that time, what had also happened was bartenders did what they tend to do and what they're known for doing today. They innovated on that drink, right? Very early in the cocktail's lifespan, you see what's known as the improved cocktail, which could have been made with the addition of orange liqueurs such as Grand Marnier or Cointreau, or Luxardo Maraschino, absinthe, different mixtures of bitters, and all sorts of crazy fruit garnishes and crushed ice, all sorts of things. And at some point, it got a little out of hand. And that's when you see in 1850 around, in a Chicago newspaper, you see the published drink menu for a bar listing an old-fashioned cocktail. And that's where we get the name old-fashioned from. People got tired of all of the new additions and just said, "Give it to me old-fashioned. I'm tired of this." So, looks like we're about ready to move on to our next drink here. And before we get started with it, We're going to chill our coupe glasses that we all have laid out on our tables here. So what that involves is just putting a little scoop of ice into it. And then you should have a little bit of extra soda water there. Just fill the glass up with that soda water. What this is going to do is it's going to minimize the initial heat that we're putting into that cocktail. You actually warm your cocktail up by a considerable amount if you put it into a room temperature glass. When you cool it down like this, it's going to keep the drink colder much, much longer.
Do you always use soda water?
You don't have to use soda water. No, it's not necessary. It's just, we already have soda water on the tables, so. But yeah, I normally just use regular water. All right. And for this, we're only going to need the large tin of our shaker tins. If you still got a little bit in there, you can dump that into your small shaker tin for now. Rinse it out with a little soda if you want. All right. And let's come up and grab our next ingredients.
What drink are we doing now?
This is going to be the Manhattan.
Oh, perfect.
There we go.
What are we going to do with these leftovers now?
Use them in cocktails.
Yeah. I'll take that as a final exam. That's right.
Liam, I just saw online, they were saying, where did the shot come from? Give me a shot.
Yeah.
Is in the Old West, if you didn't have enough money to pay for the drink, you could pay with a bullet. So give me a shot.
So I have heard that story, and I haven't looked into it yet to see if it's true or not. Because there are so many things you hear at the bar that I'm sure we all know this. There's so many things you hear about, and even outside the bar, in what would otherwise be reputable publications, you find that there's a lot of myths about the origins of drink-related stuff. And the end of the story is we really don't know where a lot of this comes from, but sometimes it can be nice just to believe something because it makes an interesting story, right? All right, looks like we've all got our ingredients here. We're going to start off with our bitters here. This is for the Manhattan. Yep, in the big shaker tin. We're not actually going to be shaking this cocktail. We're going to be stirring it again. But it's not one we're building in the glass. Then we're going to go, this is our sweet vermouth. And finally, we have our bourbon. This is Knob Creek Bourbon. It's another 100 proof. I like to use a higher proof whiskey in my Manhattans. It really shows up on the flavor profile a little bit nicer. And I find most people tend to like it that way. All right. Once we got all that in our shaker tin, we're going to add our ice. Do a big, healthy scoop of that. All right, looks like we're all there. And then we're just going to do exactly what we did with the old fashioned. Remember, keep your spoon on the outside of that mixing tin and let it rotate in your hand. It's really all in the wrist here. You don't need to move your whole arm, not like a mixing bowl or anything, just with your wrist, really small motions there. You should be moving all the ice kind of as one big mass. And we want to go about 30 to 40 seconds with this. It's very difficult to over dilute a drink because once it chills down to the temperature of the ice is going to melt very, very slowly. So most people don't have trouble with over dilution. It's actually under dilution. Since everything we put in here is alcoholic, yes, even the bitters are about 40% ABV, we want to make sure that just for the sake of our palates, we get a little bit of water in that. All right, and that should be good there. Another good way to tell is if you start getting frost on the edge of your glass, it's cold enough. So next we're going to take, these are called Hawthorne strainers. They've been around since around the 1810s, and they're a great way to filter ice out of any of your cocktails. So you just take it, you put the spring down over your shaker like that, and what you want to do is you press down on that little protrusion right here. You press down on it a little bit, and that's going to lock that spring in place, prevent any ice from coming out. We're going to dump our glass with that's chilling. Make sure that's all into your small shaker tin. Yep. And then we're just going to slowly pour that out into our glass here. And it should be just about a perfect fit.
How do you do that? How do you know to make the exact amount?
Well, when you measure, that's the importance of measuring your ingredients. You can get a pretty good idea of how much it's going to dilute consistently. And then when you measure your ingredients, you want to pick a glass that is going to be the right fit. So, if you're having a party or anything like that, make sure you test out your cocktails before you do it so that you know they're going to fit properly in the glassware that you have, and maybe adjust accordingly. Then we're going to take the other orange peel that we have in here, and we're going to do exactly what we did with the old fashioned. We are going to squeeze it right over that drink. And if you got a sharp eye, you'll be able to see just like little spurts of oil coming out. Yeah. And if you really want to, you can also kind of wipe the edge of this glass with it so you get that as you taste it. And then we can discard of that. And then we also have our cherries on the tables. That's what this is for. I don't like to have a orange peel on the Manhattan. I think if you put a garnish on a drink, most of the time it looks best with just one garnish. And the cherry at the bottom of the glass is really the traditional garnish for a Manhattan. That's what most people are expecting to see. So just take your cherry, drop it right in there, and it should look something like this. All right. Now let's talk a little bit about the history of the Manhattan. Manhattan, of all the classic cocktails, has one of the murkiest histories. It's a little hard to get a read on it. We know it was invented somewhere in New York City, and it starts emerging somewhere around the end of the 19th century, around 1880. Other than that, we don't know who made it, and we don't know exactly where it comes from, although we do have a good lead, which is the Manhattan Club in, you guessed it, Manhattan. It was we know that they had their own signature cocktail around 1880, and we think it might have been the Manhattan, but at the end of the day, nobody really knows for sure. There is a apocryphal tale about Winston Churchill's mother being involved in the invention of the Manhattan, that it was made for a gala that she was attending here in the Estates, but it doesn't really line up because that gala that happened lines up exactly with the christening of baby Winston Churchill back in London, England. So if you ever hear that, you know that's not true. I want to talk a little bit about the spirits that we used in this cocktail as well. We used, for one, vermouth. Now, vermouth is wine. I'm sure you probably know that. But it is a sweetened, fortified, and aromatized wine. Now, what does all that mean? Sweetened, pretty obvious, they added sugar to it. Fortified means they added liquor to it, right? It increases the ABV. That's why vermouth tends to be somewhere around 18% ABV, as compared to most other wines are going to be between 10 to 14%. And then aromatized means they used a variety of herbs and spices to alter the flavors of that vermouth. The word vermouth actually comes from German. It means wormwood, right? If you've ever heard of wormwood, it's a very bitter liqueur. You know what Malort is? It's a very popular liquor in Chicago. Wormwood is the main flavor of that. You don't get a ton of wormwood flavor in vermouth just because of everything else going on in it, all the other aromatics and everything. But that is, originally how vermouth was made. That's where the word comes from. Now, we also used bourbon in this cocktail. Now, bourbon wouldn't have necessarily been the traditional liquor of choice. Actually, rye was more popular in the United States, basically since the inception of the country, all the way up until after Prohibition, when bourbon really started to take over. Although, within certain pockets and regions of the U.S., bourbon was certainly more popular. Places like New Orleans, a lot of the American South in general, bourbon really was popular compared to rye. But rye was used in most cocktails up until post-Prohibition. Although you would see bourbon pop up in place of rye here and there. Now, what makes bourbon bourbon as opposed to other whiskeys is bourbon is made with 51% corn, and then the rest of that can be anything else. It could be rye, barley, oats, anything else that they're using to make whiskey. Bourbon could be 49% that, but it has to be 51% corn, and it also has to be aged in charred American oak barrels. Now, this tradition actually comes from end of the 1700s, around 1780, early 1780s. And what would happen is you would have these corn whiskey distillers out in Kentucky along the banks of the Mississippi River, and they were making their whiskey as cheaply as possible, right? There wasn't a lot of oversight back in the day. They would just kind of pump out whiskey, try to make as much profit as they possibly could, and part of that entailed using used wine barrels to ship it in. And to get rid of the wine flavor in those barrels, they would char the insides of them, burn off all that wine, and then put their really unaged distillate, for the most part, in these barrels, and then ship them down to New Orleans. Now, whiskey from Bourbon County, Kentucky, specifically became very popular in New Orleans because of that charred oak flavor that was imparted onto the liquor during transit. It tends to give flavors of, most people describe it as vanilla, caramel, toffee, these kind of like nice sweet flavors that we associate with bourbon today. And there became a great demand for it, for these charred oak barrel aged whiskeys. And from there it took off, and that's exactly what we have today. It's the only spirit that is native exclusively to the U.S. You can make rye whiskey anywhere in the whole world, but you can't make bourbon anywhere outside of the U.S. So it's kind of like Scotch in that regard. Scotch whiskey can only be made in Scotland. Cognac can only be made in France. Bourbon can only be made in America. So, I think it's time for our final cocktail here. This is going to... Yes? Oh, excellent question. So, dry vermouth and sweet vermouth. Sweet vermouth is referred to as, especially historically, Italian vermouth. This was a popular style in, especially in northern Italy. They made a lot of vermouths. And then dry vermouth would have mostly been made in France. Now, there's a little bit of a mixture here because there are some specialty vermouths. You have some sweet white vermouths, and you have some dry red vermouths. But for the most part, dry vermouth is going to be less sweetened, and it's going to be made with a white wine. It's going to be overtly more herbal. I tend to get a lot of walnut flavors from a dry vermouth, whereas a sweet vermouth is going to have more of those kind of like dark, cherry, fruity flavors. You're going to use that in very different cocktails. In general, I find dry vermouths pair much better with gin than they do with like whiskeys and things like that. And then sweet vermouth tends to pair much better with whiskey.
I'm curious, Pam, the addition of the cherry,
Yes.
is there any
Yes, actually, as far back as we can as we have records on the Manhattan, it seems like a cherry was the go-to garnish. You can find the odd cocktail book that recommends using an olive as a garnish for a Manhattan, which, yeah, I would advise against. Yeah, they kind of really went all over the board with their garnishes back in the day. You can even find them using pickled chestnuts for some garnishes and things like that. Yeah, just, it feels like they were just kind of throwing darts at a wall and, picking whatever garnish hit. But, that's what you have when information travels very slowly. People didn't really have much time to come to a consensus on these things. So a lot of different things kind of popped up all over the country. And then over time, a standard form based on what most people tended to enjoy most of the time. Yeah. So next we're going on to our final drink. This is going to be the daiquiri. Now, it's the daiquiri as we know it today is pretty different from the daiquiri that we would have seen emerge around the beginning of the 20th century. Most sources date it back to around 1910. You can come up and grab your ingredients while I'm doing this a little bit, and also bring up your small shaker tin that's filled with all that ice. We're going to want to dump it in this bucket here so that we have room to shake. So the classic daiquiri is made with just 3 simple ingredients. It's going to be simple syrup, lime juice, and rum. Now, today I've picked out a specific rum blend that I like to use for my daiquiris. It's a mix of Bacardi and Wray & Nephew rum. So it's not the most traditional daiquiri, but it is the one that I find tastes the best to the most people. There we go. All right. And now, we'll gotta give you guys a second to get situated there. Yeah, we are. Yes, we are going to be using our coupe glasses again as well for this. So if your coupe glass is still full, if you need another one, let me know. Yeah, that's perfect. Thank you. Yes. Now, just as we did last time, let's start off by getting those coupe glasses chilling. Some ice in there and then some water on top. Everybody doing all right on ice at the tables? All right. Especially with a daiquiri, this is a drink that you want to make sure is cold. It's very heavy on the rum, and it's also got a lot of lime juice in it, which can have some bitterness. So we want to mitigate that by making that drink as cold as possible. Coldness suppresses your sense of taste, which can be very good when you're dealing with super strong and flavorful ingredients. It allows you to kind of take the drink in a little bit easier. So we're going to start off with our simple syrup here. We're going to put this in the large shaker tin. Then we're moving on to our lime juice. And finally, this is our rum blend. We're using a Puerto Rican and Jamaican rum blend. Gives it just a little bit of funkiness. I'll get into the difference between the rums right after we make the cocktail. No, you're all good. Now, for this one, we're going to do a traditional shake. So we are going to load up our shaker tin with ice. Don't be afraid. Just don't fill it quite up to the brim. We do want to be able to fit the other side of the shaker tin on there. But yeah, load it up with a good amount of ice. All right, and now we're just going to put that right on there. Tap it in just a little bit, but not too much. Do a light shake, just get that air cooled so you get that seal going. And then you want to hold it horizontally and really throw it back and forth, right? You want to break up the ice in that. Make sure you're totally chilling, diluting the drink. And we want to go for about 15 seconds here. You don't need to go too long until the shakers get pretty cold. Mine are feeling cold right now, so I think we're about good. And then, like I said, just kind of slap the side of your cocktail shaker like that. I'd be careful with that. Sometimes it can shatter the glass. The glass ones can be a little harder to work with than the metal ones. Want me to grab it for you?
Yeah, appreciate it.
No problem. There we go. You're good.
I was trying not to.
Then we're going to use our strainer again here after we dump out our cocktails. We're going to be using our strainer again. Really going to want to press down on that. It tightens the spring, stops those chips of ice that we just introduced from falling into the final drink. And just let that out right there. All right, and we're going to take our final garnish out. It's going to be a lime wheel. Just stick that right on the edge of our glass like so. This right here is a classic daiquiri. One of my personal favorite drinks. The fun thing about a daiquiri is you have a lot of room to experiment with your rums. It's a great way to get to know your spirits. Because there's so much variation in rum, you're going to taste a huge difference in the final product here. If you switch it out, let's say, you instead of using a Puerto Rican rum, you use an El Salvadorian rum, you're going to notice that right away. Now, a little bit of history about this drink. It was invented sometime around 1910 in Cuba, which at the time was a popular vacation resort, especially for Americans. If you've ever seen The Godfather Part 2, you'll know that all the Americans get kicked out of the resorts when the Cuban Revolution happens. But before that, huge party place, especially during Prohibition. A lot of people went over to Cuba just to drink. Right? There was no Prohibition in Cuba, so... But a lot of people think that the daiquiri was introduced by an American visiting Cuba. He was a bartender, also an engineer, and he invented the drink there. Some Cubans say that a Cuban invented it. There's a lot of back and forth, and nobody's quite sure. But it's hard to lay claim to a drink as simple as just some rum, lime, and sugar, right? Either way, daiquiris were traditionally made with Cuban rum, which is a rare commodity here in America today, considering we don't do much trading with Cuba. But what a lot of people don't know is Bacardi was actually started in Cuba, and during the revolution, they were kicked out and moved to Puerto Rico. So they make their rum in a similar way. You can do a daiquiri with just Bacardi rum, although it's not my favorite. I think Bacardi's a little light. You want to introduce a little bit more funkiness into it, and that's why I picked up the Wray & Nephew to blend with the rum a little bit. If you notice any funky fruit flavors, notes of like banana, those are called esters. Those are the chemicals that introduce those kind of funky flavors into rum. And Wray and Nephew is loaded with them. So if you add even like a bar spoon of this into your daiquiris, you're going to notice a big difference between that and just using something like Bacardi on its own. Now, a little bit about rum, as Jeff had asked earlier. Wasn't trying to call you out there, man. You're good. No, but as Jeff had asked earlier, what's the difference between different styles of rum? Well, it goes back to colonial history, right? As we know, the Caribbean was one of the first places in the New World to be colonized, mostly by the Spanish, who came over and also brought over their distillation techniques, right? Most of these colonies were used to grow sugarcane, and in sugar production, you have left over what is molasses. Now, if you ever tasted molasses, you know it's got a very sweet flavor. It kind of tastes like metal as well. But what you can do with it, instead of trying to, bake it into a pie or something like that, you can ferment it and then distill it, and then you will end up with what is known as rum. That's what we call it. And in addition to that, there's another style of rum called rum agricole, which is made with the pure sugarcane juice before it's processed into sugar, right? So you'll just juice a sugarcane plant and then turn that directly into rum. You tend to get more grassy flavors out of those, whereas with a traditional molasses-based rum, those tend to be a little bit more on the funky, fruity side. Sometimes you'll get some notes of molasses in those, but it really depends. Now, with the British colonies, such as Jamaica, you will get most rum is pot distilled, which imparts more of the flavor of the rum. A lot of times they like to age this rum they age that rum. A lot of those Jamaican rums can be a little bit better for sipping on the rocks and things. But, really depends on what kind of style you're getting. Rum is probably one of the most varied spirits that is still in production today. While with whiskey, you have to, is this whiskey a bourbon? Is it a rye? Is it a scotch? Irish whiskey. Those are all strict definitions. Rum, it's anyone's guess, right? If they tell you something on the bottle, they have to be producing it that way. So if it says aged 5 years, it does have to be aged a minimum of 5 years. But, what it's distilled from, how it's distilled can vary in a lot of different ways. So there are some really quality rums being produced, and it's kind of overlooked as a quality spirit, but you can get some fantastic rums for the price of a really bad bottle of whiskey, right? Rum is a very cheap comparative spirit when you're comparing it to whiskey. So that's rum. That's the daiquiri. And with that, we have finished all of our cocktails here. I do have some handouts for you guys detailing the specs on all the cocktails we made here today, so that you can go home, make them yourself. Hopefully now you feel like you have the techniques required and the knowledge. I specifically picked some easy cocktails today so that, all you need is lemon juice, simple syrup, lime juice, and then, whatever other base liquors. So hopefully, next time you have some guests over, you can impress them with some of your cocktail knowledge. So thank you very much. Appreciate you guys coming out.